Event. Hear me? Welcome, everyone. We'll just give a couple more minutes so everyone can join. We have a lot of attendees registered, so we just want to wait a couple more minutes. I think at 6:05 we'll start.
Yeah, I just posted it on Twitter as well. So let's see if someone comes from Twitter. In the meantime, I can tell you guys, I'm always publishing introduction to coding or video tutorials and stuff in my Twitter account. That's one of the things I do on a daily basis. So I'm just gonna publish it here. Yeah, if you guys wanna follow that, I'll be, for example, right now I'm learning Java. Well, not learning, more like relearning, because I learned it like 10 years ago, but I didn't do anything in 10 years, so I'm guessing it's very different. So I'm relearning it and I'm tweeting about it every Thursday. And then also publishing, of course, a lot of timelines of people that I think are interesting to follow in Twitter. If you want to learn to code or you are in the middle of it, Twitter is one of the most powerful tools for motivation because there's a lot of people there um, doing the same as you. There's hashtags, pretty powerful hashtags, like 100 days of code. They have like 350 tweets per hour or something. It's a lot. And there's a lot of, like, all the major developers in the world, believe it or not, they are using Twitter. Um, I thought Twitter was dead until until I discovered this huge community behind the coding community. And yes, if anyone's wondering, the Shining is behind me, the two little twins. So Twitter is a way to go for learning to code. Um, Let me just publish until we wait for this one more minute. I'm gonna publish some Twitter lists of people that I think are worth following if you wanna get started into using Twitter on a daily basis for learning to code. For example, this list that I'm publishing now in the chat, this one is, I call it Never Code Alone Again because it's a lot of people learning to code or publishing little learn to code materials, videos. Then this other list that I'm about to publish is rockstar coders. Maybe they don't publish materials about learning to code because they are not like on that mood, but they are amazing coders and they work in amazing companies, so they actually publish stuff that there is interesting for them. So that's also good, like amazing tips, for example, or libraries. So that second list that I published there is for following people on very good positions in very big companies like Twitter, Facebook, the FANG.
Amazing. So I think you can start, Ali.
Yeah, we're there. Amazing. So let's start. Let me introduce myself, and then Luis, you can introduce yourself. This is Luis' first workshop in English, so we're actually trying to help him with his English speaking in public skills. So um, bear with him and actually help him. We're gonna be doing it together. Um, Luis actually was the one that built the workshop. I and we're gonna be doing a game. I have been coding for I think 20 years already, mainly in JavaScript, Python. I was a PHP developer a long time ago, and I started with PHP actually. So I still know a lot about PHP. I know it by memory. I don't even have to Google it. But I stopped using PHP maybe around 8 years ago. No more PHP, and my transition was entirely to Python and JavaScript, and now studying a bit of Java, as I said at the beginning of the workshop. So I also co-founded 4Geeks, of course, the 4Geeks Academy, the coding bootcamp behind this event. Um, we have a track in a particular course in JavaScript and Python because those are the two biggest programming languages right now, the fastest growing languages, and with the most open vacancies for jobs. And then we have a second track that is for advanced only, like you need to know already front end and back end if you want to join that one. And it's Java focused, Java 100% coding bootcamp because that's going to take you to the next level basically. All the major companies are using Java as a main language, and then they have JavaScript for front end and Python for backend, Python for machine learning, not for backend. For backend, they have Java, and they use Python for particular things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, networking, robots, Internet of Things. Like Python is more like the wingman for Java in huge companies. I'm saying it's like the wingman. So that's why we have those two tracks. And Luis, if you wanna try to introduce yourself.
Hi guys, my name is Luis. I'm from Venezuela. I have since 2000 programming in different language, Java, JavaScript, PHP, ASP, and per Python. I have for working with for Geeks Academy and almost 2 years here in Chile.
Yeah, Luis was our
I
first
have
instructor actually.
I have 20 years programming and learning all days.
Someone was asking about Go language. Go language is an alternative for Java for some people. I don't see it as an alternative because Java is too way too used already. I see it as a maybe as a complement because Go is very new. The thing about new languages is that they are amazing. But if you go to a company, the adoption is slow. So it's and you never know what's gonna happen in the long run. Like for example, Python was not being as used 20 years ago or 10 years ago. Because remember, Python started in 1991, so it's one of the oldest languages. And then PHP started growing a lot and stuff, and Python was more like in the shadows. But then Python had this reburn. So Python is still king today because it basically came back. So you never know what's going to happen. So I think the war of languages is not you shouldn't have like this attitude thinking that a language is better than another one. You should be more like a Swiss Army. I know these languages. I'm happy with this. I wanna look for jobs in this area, and if you like your life and what that language is giving you, you should just stay there and stop thinking about what language is better than another one. I think it's more a philosophy behind everything, I guess. If you know C++, you will be working probably in a rocket company, in a car company, a lot of hardware. If you know Java, you'll be working in huge companies, very big companies, all of them. And if you know Python, you will be working in AI and robotics and machine learning and stuff like that. If you know JavaScript, you will be doing front end and maybe some microservices for backend, but mostly front end, basically. So that's basically your way of life. But let's start with the presentation. I'm gonna, since we are two, Luis and me are sharing this workshop. You have the luxury of having someone reading at the comments all the time. So I'll be answering questions when Luis is talking, and Luis will be, I guess, answering questions when Luis is when I'm talking. So to start, let me share the screen here. Here we are. So on the right side of my screen, you will find Louis' computer. The right side of the screen is Louis. So Louis will be coding as I speak. And on the left side of the screen, it's a presentation. That's how we figured we could do this. Obviously, it has a disadvantage that maybe you don't see some of the things that we are. So Louis, if you can increase the font, that would be amazing. What we're going to be doing is a game. Louis has the game on the right, so you can watch Louis' computer right now. Can you demonstrate the game? It's a memory game. So it's basically a bunch of squares, and you have to click on 2 to see if you memorize correctly. At some point, you will be matching the 2. There you go. So that's completed, right? He was able to match 2 of the... Yeah. And then an algorithm or a small script to discover if you finish the game. Calculate if you finish the game. And this is actually one of the main things people like JavaScript so much. And JavaScript is used as a language to learn how to code a lot, because you can see what you do right away. You know, when you learn with another language, maybe it's gonna take a while so that you can see something appealing. But with JavaScript, you can in 2 hours build something that you can use or your mom can use. You know, and that's super fun to be able to share your accomplishments. Okay, so let's start. I'm gonna start with well, everyone I think here knows what JavaScript is. Basically, it's the front-end language, the only front-end language you can use to make your websites interactive in every device. Because if you use some other languages, for example, you can do some front-end with Java, you can do some front-end with Python, but that's not ideal. And that's why JavaScript is universal and it's used in every major browser. All the browsers are compatible with it. So JavaScript is the language for front-end, basically. We're going to be talking first about JavaScript variables. If you don't know something, if you have a question, please stop me and I'll stop. JavaScript variables are mainly, like, the thing is that one of the things that one of the things a language has to do is they have to choose how they want to store information. Like if you are, for example, a language for financing, you know, for finances, the way you store has to be very specific, you know, because maybe a comma will change everything. If you put the comma in the wrong place, you could be giving millions of dollars to someone, you know. So when a language picks the data types that it's going to allow, it's a big decision. It's a major decision. And JavaScript, decided to allow strings, digits, names can contain, these are the names of the variables, my bad. I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. In this one, I was going to talk about how you should name variables. And this is something, developers fight about this. You should name it with an underscore. No, you should use capital letters. So you are allowed to use letters, digits, underscores, and dollar signs as long as you don't use digits first. Like the first thing you put in a variable shouldn't be a digit. So it must begin with a letter. Also, you can use dollar signs, but it's not recommended anymore because there's something called jQuery that uses that so much that people will think you're using jQuery, that is like a subset of JavaScript. You can also use underscores, and that's recommended for when you're going to be using a variable. It's called a private variable. It's a variable that you don't want to share with another part of the program. You don't have to understand this yet. Private variables is something that you see later on in your coding education. You don't have to use dollar signs or underscores if you don't want. People don't tend to use it that much. Everything is case sensitive. That's really important. So if you use a variable name starting with a capital, then you have to stick to capitals every time you use that variable. You cannot just switch. This is a common problem in junior developers. They forget about capitals and lower cases. And then you have something we call the reserved words. There are some keywords that are not allowed. For example, you cannot name a variable math. because there's already, that word is already taken. So you have to know by memory, and this is one of the annoying things about learning a coding language, is that sometimes you don't know the reserved words. Like, what words can I not use? What words can I use? If you want, what you can do is just ignore the reserved words and try to use whatever you want, and the coding editor will tell you in a different color if you're using a reserved word. Luis, can you open a coding editor and maybe we can show what I'm saying as I talk? Maybe you can show it. Open the Visual Studio or Gitpod. Yeah. I just want to show how the coding editor will highlight for you if you're using the wrong word, because it's a reserved word. It's going to let you know by using a different color. Because it's funny how designers have so many tools to work, and people that use, for example, architects, they also have these amazing programs that they can use, very expensive, and they will lay out the entire building in 3D. Coders still use the same good old plain text. We don't have any software. We're using the same things that we've been using since code started existing. So when you declare a variable in JavaScript, you can see Luis' screen on the right. You have to specify the let or var, Luis, on the left. Can you make the code bigger, please? Yeah. So at the beginning, you have to say let or var. The reason there's two, let and var, is because at the beginning it was just var. Var, it will be short for variable. But after so many years, they discovered a bug in the JavaScript world, and they had to rename it to let, because var was already being used in so many programs that they cannot just change the default behavior for var. So they decided to rename it to let. So you can keep using the old var, or you can start using let, basically. My recommendation, never use var, always use let. And forget about var. Forget it existed. It exists. You have to finish every line with a semicolon, but you don't really, because that's not needed anymore, because there's like 0.5% of the cases that not using semicolons at the end will give you trouble. But that 0.5% of the cases is so small that people just don't use semicolons anymore. But maybe an academic, a very formal person will tell you that you have to use semicolons. So don't take my word for granted. Maybe someone will tell you that that guy that was talking to you is a moron. I would say you can choose whatever you want. I choose not using semicolons that much anymore. Can you try to declare a variable with a reserved name? Try to use it with type. Create a variable name type. I think, or type of, maybe type of. Type of. So that's a reserved word. You cannot name variables type of. And I don't know what the coding editor is saying. It's not giving the right error. It's giving an error, but not for the right reasons. It's saying that there's expecting like a symbol. I don't know what that means. Can you try in Visual Studio? Maybe it's a Github thing.
It is not to be the O in capital.
That doesn't have to be like that, but it's a good practice.
Oh.
We call that camel case. So basically, every time when you are declaring variable names, you have to start always with a lowercase, and then every new word, you have to put it connected, no spaces, and you put a capital letter at the beginning of the word so that people know easily that that's a new word, basically. So type of is one of the reserved words. There are plenty others. You can Google reserved words for JavaScript and you'll see. Okay. We will be opening a coding editor soon. Don't worry. I'm not going to be speaking for an hour. Let's see. Type of equals something. Open on type of, and yeah, the same problem. I don't know. The thing is that type of is a reserved word, and you cannot use it. At least it's giving us an error. Okay, just to continue. You can store strings, booleans, numbers, I think big int is not a primitive, Luis. No, right? No. This one is not a real variable type. You just have numbers because JavaScript is not a language for financing or for finances. So it only has numbers. That's it. You cannot have like very particular types of numbers. In other languages like Java, you have big numbers, small numbers, float. If you have a background in math, you will be familiarized with the word float. So you have floats as well. No, in JavaScript, you only have numbers. No, actually, a big int is a number because the computer is doing a lot of things in the background, right? So when you declare a number or an integer, the computer will reserve a certain amount of memory to allow that number to exist. So if your number is bigger than that, then it will get an error. I don't know if you guys remember about the bug that existed in YouTube when the Gangnam Style song got more than, I think it's 1 billion likes. They never expected having a video with more than 1 billion likes. So when that happened, it's because YouTube had integer instead of big integer. So they had to redo the entire YouTube code and reset the variable names, or the variable types to big int instead of int. And that's how they fix the bug. So basically, you have to choose if you want int or big int, but that's in a different language. In JavaScript, you don't pick that. In JavaScript, you say number, and that's it. Because JavaScript is a very informal language. JavaScript wants you to be agile, and that has pros and cons, obviously, right? So the pro is that you have a language that is easy to use, but the con is that you're using a lot of memory, not a lot, but more than other languages, I guess. So you have strings, booleans, numbers. You don't have big ints. You have something called undefined, and this is another huge problem in JavaScript. When you don't declare a variable, it still exists. That's another problem in JavaScript. In other languages, when you have a variable, when you try to console log or print a variable, and the variable doesn't exist, it will give you an error. JavaScript will not give you an error. It will tell you that the variable value or the value of the variable is undefined. It's a problem sometimes because the error doesn't occur in the coding editor. It occurs later on when you're actually using the website. So that's too late to have an error. You would like to have the errors beforehand. You would like to have them here as you code. JavaScript will not do that. JavaScript will wait until you're using the application to tell you that variable that you're trying to use doesn't exist. So it's too late for the error. So the users will see the error, actually, instead of you as a coder. Okay. So to define a variable, we already specified this. To define a variable, you say let age 32, for example, for a number. For an amount, you can use negative numbers as well. You can use, for a salary, you can use a float like this. But JavaScript will consider it a number, not a float. You can have strings. You can have arrays. Anyone knows here what an array is? No? You can put it in the chat. Okay, if no one knows what an array is, basically it's an array.
Sorry.
I'm sorry?
Isn't it a data structure? A certain.
It is one of the simplest data structures. Yes, it is. And it also is a collection. Natasha was saying about collections. The thing about a collection is that a collection is just a bunch of things, right? But an array, it's a very particular type of collection. So an array will be a collection that it's ordered, right? It has an order. You have to have them in the same order. That's very specific, A collection, no. A collection is something that you can iterate. I mean, you can go through them, but they may not be in the same order always, and you actually don't care. But JavaScript doesn't have collections. JavaScript only has arrays as a basic data type. So basically in JavaScript, you have ordered lists all the time. You don't have unordered lists. Can you declare an array there, Luis? So for an example of an array would be, let's say, like names of friends that you have, right? Or scores. Luis is putting scores. Or actually, let's wait. Friends. Okay. So you have friends and you are declaring them inside of an array. You start using square brackets. Okay, that's the symbol for saying that you want to start putting a list or an array. And the particular order that you use will always stick there. So for example, you could say that you're sorting them by how amazing they are. You know, I have a list of friends from the more amazing friend to the less amazing friend. Because it's an array. If you had a collection, then it will be just a bunch of friends without any particular order. If you want to retrieve an item from it, you will use the same square brackets, but next to the variable name. So if we want, for example, to get the second friend, can you console log the second friend, Luis?
Sorry, I don't hear you.
Can you console.log the second friend? Like this, Charles. Try to console.log Charles. Let me show you as well how to run JavaScript, okay? If you have a computer in front of you, you can try this with us. Basically, open a new... who doesn't have a Visual Studio here? Or any other coding editor? It can be, let me put here, you can have Atom. You can have Visual Studio. My recommendation is use Visual Studio. You can have, I think there's one called Brackets. Sublime, actually, I was a Sublime user for a long time. Oh yeah, I misspelled it. It's brackets. Like that. My recommendation, use Visual Studio because it's the one with most documentation. You always want to go with the most popular one in everything when you're coding, because if not, if you encounter a problem, you may not find the solution as quick as possible. So for example, if you are a Spanish speaker, right now, switch your computer to English, because you don't want to be looking for the errors in Spanish. You will not find a lot of solutions. You want to look for you want to switch to English 100% because it's the most popular language, and you want to switch to Visual Studio because it's the most popular coding editor. Right, yeah, that's a very good observation, Giovanni. VS Code, it's how people call it, VS Code. There's a free version and a paid version. Use the free version that it's all blue. You can see it in Luis' screen, how it's blue. So download Visual Studio if you don't have it, or VS Code, my bad. And play with it after the workshop. For whoever doesn't have Visual Studio right now and is not familiar with it, my recommendation will not be to be using Visual Studio, will be to be using Gitpod. Gitpod is this, Gitpod. I'm gonna show you the program. It's a website that allows you to have Visual Studio without downloading it, and I think it's ideal for starting right away. You know, you just click here and try now, and connect your GitHub to it. When you click try now, it will ask you how you want to log in. You're gonna say that you want to log in with. Let me see, because I think I'm already logged in. Maybe. Login. Click on login. My bad. And it's gonna ask you if you want to log in with GitHub, with GitLab, or with Bitbucket. My recommendation is use GitHub because GitHub is the most popular one. Again, so GitHub will allow you to start your career as a software developer. Because when you are a software developer and you're looking for a job, basically what people will look to see or to validate your credentials is how many hours or how many activity you have in GitHub. That's a great validation tool for a recruiter. So my recommendation is create a GitHub account as well when you have time, and then connect to Gitpod with GitHub. Gitpod and GitHub are different things, okay? This is my GitHub. You can see that I have a lot of green dots. The more green dots you have, the more activity you have, and that's what you want to accomplish. This is an entire year of activity. Okay, so going back to the workshop. So actually, I would recommend 100%, and I will tell everyone right now to go to search in Google for GitHub. No, my bad. Gitpod Chrome extension. There's also a Firefox extension if you have Mozilla Firefox. So Google Gitpod Chrome extension. Because we're gonna be doing the workshop. You're gonna code this project using Gitpod or Visual Studio, VS Code. So Gitpod Chrome extension. You don't show the number of hours. Giovanni, you ask how do you show the number of hours? You don't show the number of hours, you show the number of days. And it's here. When you go to your profile after you open your GitHub account, like I said, you have the activity graph here, and this is every year that I have been coding. February 2nd, for example, I did 5 contributions. On February 10th, I did 56 contributions. And you can go back in time for any day that I have been coding since 2010 that I opened my GitHub account. Okay. Okay, so back to Gitpod Chrome extension, and then click on the first results that you find. That's going to take you to the Chrome store or to the Firefox store, depending on your browser. If you're using Safari, stop using Safari right now. It's a bad idea. Safari is not a good browser for coders. It's not compatible with most of the JavaScript. No, not most. A minority, but it's plenty still of the new JavaScript techniques or CSS and HTML. So Safari is basically the new Internet Explorer. If you guys remember about Internet Explorer, how everyone hated it. Safari, it's becoming that. Hopefully they will fix it, but so far, not a good idea to be using it for coding. Then click here. It's not going to say remove Chrome Brave. Just click here and say it's going to say install. So you're going to install your Gitpod extension, and after you do that, you're going to see that. Let me show you today's project. This one. You can come here to, I'm going to put the link here in the chat. Right there. That's Louis' GitHub. You're going to go there and you're going to see a green button on the top right that says Gitpod. Let me know if you don't see that button. If you're using Visual Studio, then it's a different flow. And then I'll go back to the code. Just let me know. Everything good. I see it too. Mine says code in green. Yeah, actually code in green is not good. It needs to say Gitpod in green. Code is the other one. So make sure that you installed the extension. Well, after you see the button, click on it. Click on it and it will start trying to open Okay, if you are having problems, we don't mind seeing your actual screen. If you want to share your screen, we can fix any problems you have, because I would love for you to follow instead of not following, you know. So if you want to share your screen, go ahead. Right. Giovanni is saying that CodeSpaces it's like a GitHub, like a Gitpod that GitHub is creating. It's probably going to be exactly the same as Gitpod, but it's going to take them probably a little bit of time to accomplish it, because Gitpod has been in development for a long time, and CodeSpaces has been in development for maybe a year or something. So they're still developing it. Eventually, you'll see how CodeSpaces is going to become very similar to Gitpod, basically. If you want to share screen, don't worry. Just ask questions and we'll be able to answer right away. Okay. If no one is asking any questions, yes, Paola, you can share your screen. Go ahead. We're going to share back. If you want to share screen, you have to click on the top. On the top, there's 4 buttons. It says only moderator can share screen. My bad. No, it doesn't say that. It's okay. I see your screen now. So show me how you installed the plugin. Go to... Yeah, you don't have it there. So you need to install it. So go to Google and search for Gitpod. Chrome extension, exactly. Click on it, or go to that one, and then click on the first results that says, oh, it's none of those. Scroll down. It's because you put GitHub. It's Gitpod. Gitpod Chrome plugin. It's with a P. Gitpod. So Gitpod. You're missing the O now and the D. So Gitpod. I can put it here in the chat if you want. You did it? It's Gitpod Chrome plugin. Okay, that's the first one. Yeah. Yeah, I want to help her because probably some people are having the same issue, but they were shy about it. So after we finish this, we continue. Okay. Now click on install. Add to Chrome on the right. And accept. Añadir extensión. You see the button? And then you can go back to GitHub and you'll see the green button now. Go back to the tab for GitHub. The second tab. Right there. Yeah, just click on it. Yeah, and then refresh, and you will see the button now. There it is. So that's it. You can click on it, and now I'm gonna share my screen now again. Second. Cancel. Share. Continue. Share. Okay, here we are. We're back. Okay, so after you open it, you will find the coding environment. Luis, can you show your coding environment? That's what you will see. You will see on the left a bunch of files. This is the normal structure when you're building a project with JavaScript. sometimes you will see that there's also a source folder. But normally, you have the CSS, the image, and the JS folders, because as you know, guys, JavaScript is a front-end language. So you always have to use HTML and CSS. Like, you cannot avoid it. So even though you're using JavaScript, you're also using CSS and you're also using HTML always, because the only way to show something to someone is by using HTML and CSS. JavaScript comes after you show something, actually. JavaScript comes for the dynamic part or for the interaction. So that's why we need a CSS folder. Can you open the CSS folder for a second?
Sorry?
And you have, inside the CSS folder, you have always probably a style.css. Luis, can you open the CSS? It's right there. Style.css, and then you have a bunch of images. These are the images that we'll be using for our game. And then we have a JS folder that only contains one main.js. And this is going to be, main.js will be our way, our entry point, like our JavaScript will be there. The CSS is already built for this project because we're not focusing on CSS. We're going to be focusing on JavaScript only. And then open the index.html for a second. So the index.html contains when a browser, actually when a browser like Chrome or like Safari or like Firefox opens a website, it will always look for the index.html, and then from there you have to import any other programming language or any other file that you have. So for example, here you'll see that we have on the line number 7, we have a style.css. We're saying that we want to use the style.css file that is on the CSS folder. And then at the bottom, scroll all the way down, Luis, please. We have the script on the 69. We have the script that is basically how we import JavaScript into our HTML. So that's how the browser knows. If you're asking in your mind, if you're saying, how does the browser knows which files it's going to be using? The index.html is responsible for that. The browser will only assume that you have an index.html. Anything else, aside from the index.html, it's going to start like looking at the script tags, and it's going to start looking at the link tags. So script tags are for JavaScript, and link tags are for CSS. You don't have to use CSS in a separate style sheet, but it's a recommendation. Another thing that I can recommend you now is, please do not do whatever you want. Because when someone hires you, they appreciate a lot that you follow best practices. There's plenty of ways of doing things, and you will not get fired as much for being slow, unless you're like crazy slow, right? But you will get instantly fired if you don't follow best practices. So if you ask me, what's more important, to be fast or to be following good practices? Following good practices. So I'm telling you all the good practices right now. I'm telling you, index.html is the entry point, and you have to have separate files for JavaScript and separate files for CSS, okay? If you find a tutorial that is not doing that, stop the tutorial, because you don't want to learn, you want to learn the best practices. It's a very specific type of learning, not just everything, you know? Okay, so going back to the main. The website, the browser already knows that we're going to be using a main.js at the bottom of the index.html. So we can start playing around with this. We can start throwing some code. For example, we could declare some variables. Let me see, Giovanni is saying something. The other thing is because we want to, right. Giovanni is saying that we're using, maybe you're wondering, why is the link tag at the top, but the script tag at the bottom? And that's because the browser loads websites from top to bottom. So you want JavaScript to be the last thing to load, because if you don't, you could be executing JavaScript before HTML is done. So maybe in JavaScript you're saying, I want to do something after the user clicks on a button. That's JavaScript, right? But maybe the button is not there yet, because maybe the HTML is not fully loaded yet. So you want to make sure to add the script tag at the end, because that way you know that it's 100% ready. And actually, that's not entirely true. You also need another assurance, but for now, we can just stick to that. You will need a second type of assurance. But I think it's good, this one at least, to have this one. That's also a good practice, by the way, to put in the script tag at the bottom before the body closing tag. Okay, so we can start declaring our variables. If we're going to build a game like that, we have to start thinking about how do we want to organize the data of the game. So if we're doing a memory game, what types of, like, how do you want to store the information for a memory game? We've seen that we have strings. On my left screen, I'm gonna go back to the types of variables that we have. We have strings, we have booleans, we have numbers. We don't have arrays here. I think it's our bad. There should be an array here as a structural type, a data structure. We have objects, functions, and arrays. And we have null, and we have undefined. So, for example, all the cards needs to be stored in a variable so that we can show them. So what type of structure should we use for the cards? Any ideas? Remember, we have strings, we have numbers, we have arrays, we have booleans. Booleans are true and false. Booleans. For the cards, if you want to do a list of cards.
To do an array.
Exactly. We need to do an array because it's a list of cards, right? So the list of cards needs to be in a list. So is the list of cards, Luis, part of what you plan to do?
Not.
You didn't plan to do a list of cards? You can start. Can you start coding the exercise as you were planning to do it, and I can go with you following and commenting on it?
Okay. Now we need to open the main file inside the JS folder. And we are going to create a function called initGame.
Okay, so a function, if you're wondering what that is, a function is basically a bunch of lines of code. Okay, so when you're coding, so from 1 to 5 in this case, right? We have 5 lines of code. So let me see if I can annotate. I want to be able to annotate. I'm not sure I can. Let me see something. Annotate, and then, okay, I can annotate here. Can I annotate here? No, I cannot. Oh, my bad. So I will use the mouse as annotation. So when you code, you go from 1 to 5 because the browser or the coding, the computer will run the code from the first line to the 5th line. But it's a good practice to always encapsulate or group your code in functions that basically will be executed for later. So if the computer sees that you're in line number 1 and the first thing you're doing is declaring a function, whatever is inside the function, and you can know what's inside a function by opening and closing a curly bracket. This opening and closing curly brackets determine the beginning and the end of the function. So whatever is inside of that function will not be executed right now. Will be executed later. Okay, so it's like you're postponing code. But the amazing thing about it is that you can execute it as many times as you want. So for example, if you call this function, because then you have to call the function later on for the computer to actually execute it, right? So we have in line number 2, we have a console log that says init game. So what that's going to do is that it's going to print on the console, and I'm going to explain what the console is. It's a tool that we use as developers. It's going to print init game on the console. So can you run this, Luis, and show the console? Let me make this bigger so that we can see it better. There. But can you run it with a console? I think we will have to run it on a browser. I can give you a command that you can use for that.
I'm going to change the Visual Studio.
No, we can do it here as well. Let me give you guys a command to run the code without much trouble. Empty project, yes. Open repository. This.
Leandro.
Yeah. So I'm pasting on the chat a command that you can use to run the code. So copy that. Can you do it as well, Luis? So you're gonna open the terminal. On the top, you see that there's a lot of. But wait a second, Luis. Can you close the terminal? Let's show them how to open the terminal. Okay, so if you wanna open a terminal, you click on Terminal, New Terminal, and that's gonna open something we call the terminal. It's a way to use the computer from a black screen, basically. Paste in that terminal. Paste what I put on the chat. So pip3 install flask & python server.py. I know that this seems weird, but it's a quick way that we have to run code, to run a website. After you do that, your website's gonna run. Oh wait. That's not the one. I gave the
server.py.
It's another command, my bad. It's simple HTTP server Python. Give me a second. I'm gonna give you the right command. This one. It's my bad. I think it's this one. Let's try. Can you try this one, Luis? This other one? And then run it. Put Python 3 instead of Python. Python 3. Python 3. I put it again. The last one. No model, simple HTTP server on Python 3. Oh my god. That's just horrible. Wait a second. How come there's no Python 3 either? http.server Python. I think it's this one. Let me see. http. Let's try this one. Okay. Can you try that one, Luis, please? This one. See if it works. Woohoo! So that one worked. Okay, so the last one that I put, please. Sorry for the confusion. So paste that one in your browser, and it will start. Can you go back to the Github for a second? It will start. Can you do it again? Control C, paste it. Okay, press enter. and it will ask for, it will like a dialog will prompt saying make public, open preview, or open browser. My recommendation, do open browser, and that's how your website is going to be showing, okay? Your current website. You should be seeing the same as we are. Share them. If you are not seeing this, please ask on the command line. Ivana was asking if you have to use let. Yes, you always have to use let. If you are declaring a variable, you have to use let. So let me know in the chat if you were able to run the server by using simple, the command that I put on the chat, Python -m HTTP server 9000. If you couldn't, we don't mind taking a minute to respond your question, because I'm sure that any one of the other 33 people could be having the same problem. Okay. So if you want to share screen for 1 minute, Natasha, we can figure out your issue. Type the full command that should be in the line. What do you mean? Yeah, type everything. Python -m HTTP server 9000 on the terminal. Okay, cool. Okay, so basically after you do that, you're going to be running your website. So finally, we have the website. You can go back to the website. And as you can see in Louis' website, on the right side, we have something that wasn't there before. Can you close it and show how to? Okay, so how are you going to show the console? You're going to right-click and inspect. Okay, right-click on any part of the website and then inspect. So right-click, you do it, Luis. Right-click and inspect. And you're going to see that it says right there, it says init game. It says init game. That was exactly the same thing that we console.log on the previous code. We did init game. Are you guys seeing init game? Okay, cool. So whatever you do on the command line is going to show off. It's going to show always there. So if we, for example, console log something different, you'll see that it's still there, whatever you do. So console log is a tool that developers use to understand what's happening with the code. In this case, we wanted to make sure that the function or the piece of code between line number 1 and line number 3 was being executed by the computer. If you comment the line number 5, if you comment it out by doing // that is what we call a comment. A comment will ignore a line of code. It will turn green because basically you cannot use it anymore. Like that line is not going to execute anymore. So if you comment that out, you'll see that if you refresh your website, after you comment it out and you save, make sure you save, please. 30% of the times when you're a junior developer, you forget to save. So don't forget to save. Or you can just use autosave, like Louis is showing you. If you click File on the top, and then autosave, it's going to automatically save for you from now on, and you will never forget. So that's a good idea to use autosave. Okay. So we commented out the line for the function, right? We commented out. So when you commented out the line number 5, the function will not be executed anymore. So that means that the lines of code between 1 and 3 will never gonna be executed again. How do you call a function? By putting the parentheses. I don't know if you guys see that in the line number 5, we say the same name of the function, init game, the same name of the function that we declared in line number 1. So this function that we declared number 1, we're putting the same name here, but we're including a parenthesis, parenthesis, semicolon. So that means that we want to call it. We want to call this function. That means we want to execute it. So we want to execute everything between the opening curly bracket and the closing curly bracket from this function. So console.log is being executed because we're calling this. If we don't do this, if we don't do line number 5, then the function on line number 3 or number 1, 2, and 3 will never execute, okay? So you can test it out. Yeah, Joanne is saying that you want to make sure that at the bottom of this editor, you can see that it says a bunch of times 127.0.0.1. That means that the server is running. If the server stops running, you will see something different there, not a bunch of 127.0.0.1. You're gonna see something different there. You're gonna see. Can you stop the server so that they see? You're gonna see Gitpod and a blue colors specifying in what directory of the computer you're at. So don't worry about those colors and stuff. Just know that if you have those colors right there, the server is not running, and you have to run it again by typing the same command again: Python -m HTTP blah 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 blah. Okay, what's the next step, Mr. Luis?
Well, now we are going to create different variables to the game. The first variable is a cons image that contain all image to use.
Okay, so we're using an array like someone specified earlier in the game. We're using an array of, instead of calling it cards, we're going to call it images, but it's the same thing, right? It's all the images of all the cards, all the cards. And we're going to put as many strings as cards we want. How many? I'm sorry?
1 to 8.
Okay, so we're going to do 8 cards. And if you're wondering, why does it say 1.png, 2.png, and 3.png? Basically, those are the path to the images in your computer. And you open the directory on the left and show the images. If you go to the image folder, you'll see that it says 1.png, 2.png, 3.png, and those are the cards. And you click on one. Click on the 1.png. That's an image. You see, it's Rigoberto saying hello. So basically, each of those is an image. You can close the image now. So we're specifying on the array of images the names of the images that we want to use as cards. You can close the directory now because it's taking too much space. Okay. What's the next step? If you have any questions, please ask.
Yeah, Alejandro, what is the main difference between console log and document.write?
That's a good question. Actually, console log will show up only for developers. Users will never see console logs. But document.write will show up on the website. So it's an entirely different thing. Can you do a document.write there, Luis? I would say never in your life again use document.write because it's not a good practice.
Okay.
But if we do it, let's do it. I'm gonna say hello world there, and let's refresh. And at the bottom, you see at the bottom it says hello world. Yeah.
So it adds to the HTML.
Exactly. And you can actually have HTML. Can you change the hello world to an H1? so that we can see how you can do actually HTML there. Wrap it in an H1 tag. On the code, on the document.write, just put an opening H1 before it inside the string. I know it's not going to highlight the colors, but it's still going to work. So before the hello, put an opening H1 on the left side of the H. Yes. And then close it. So you can do HTML in the document.write as well. And it will show up with the format. Look. Now it's a bigger hello, Alejandro, you know? It's recognizing that HTML H1s are basically bigger. It's a heading, right? A heading of the type number 1 that is very big in HTML. So yeah, document.write shows up on the document, on the file, on the website, and console.log shows in the inspector. That's why we want to use console.log, because we are using init game just for us. We don't want the user, the final user, to see the word init game. Okay. So what's the next step, Mr. Luis?
Now we are going to capture the button play.
Okay, so this is another important concept in JavaScript. JavaScript has, as you guys already know, that because I said it at the beginning, it's interactive, right? So when you're doing HTML and CSS, you're thinking about a website that is not interactive. It's more like a drawing, right? You're going to make your website look good, but it's not going to function. Or at least not in a good way. It's going to function in a very basic way. With JavaScript, you have to make it interactive. So what you do is that you, after you have your HTML, let's analyze the HTML for a second. We have, by the way, the inspector is also super cool because it will show your code, the HTML part of it. So if you right-click and inspect on the button, can you right-click and inspect on the button? Right-click and inspect on the button. On the button, there. Right-click and inspect. Usa el mouse, right-click. And inspect. And then it will show on the right side, it will highlight the actual button in HTML. You see it? It says button, ID, play, and then it closed the button tag. So that particular button is what we want the users to interact with at first. We want to wait for the user to click on that button. So JavaScript is capable of listening to clicks. And that's what we want to start the game. So how do you listen to a click? You have to first understand your HTML. Because in our case, the button, I don't know if you guys can see, the button has an ID play, right? So that means that's like the name for that button. Okay, so we have to use that same thing in the line number 7 with a hash. You see how it says, it's highlighted right now. It says hash play. So that means we're saying, hey, JavaScript, please, we want you to select that button. I want to use it. I want to listen to the click of it. You're not saying yet that you want to listen to the click. You're only saying that you want to use that button. You want to wait. You want to interact with that button. So we're saying, if I repeat line number 7, I'm going to rephrase it. We're saying, I want to declare a new variable. We're using const instead of let, but you can use let if you want. Can you switch to let? Yeah, I'm going to talk about that. Let me just explain the code first. You can use let. It doesn't really matter. We're saying that we want to store, and I know that this sounds weird, but what we're saying is that we want to select the button play, and we want to store that button in a variable. the same way that you store numbers and you store names or strings or whatever, you can also store buttons. So we're saying we want to store the play button in a variable called play. Can you rename the variable play? Can you play, instead of play, can you put play btn? Capital B? Exactly. Yeah. So that variable contains my button now. From now on, like from line number 7 on, that variable will contain the button with the ID play. Okay? And now, if you console log that button, I know it's weird. Console logging a button is weird. Like we're used to console logging. Remember that the name of the button is not play anymore. So you will have to rename the variable play. But it's going to show up on the right like that. It's going to say button ID play button. So the console is showing up what you console log. You console log a button, so it's showing you the actual button tag. Any questions? Yeah, if you misspell, let's say that you misspell play, right? And you put play with 2 Y's. Can you misspell it? Luis, can you put a different, exactly. Put whatever there? Yeah, whatever. If you say that and you refresh on your website, it's gonna show null. You see it's showing null. That's because you forgot or you didn't see that the actual name was play. So you're trying to select from the HTML a button that doesn't exist. So it's null. Okay, it's null because the ID of the button is play, not play button. Okay, so let's go back. What's the next step, Mr. Luis?
We have to do the same with another elements.
Okay.
For example, we need to get init equal document dot query selector the selector we are to use is class selector init and repeat for game.
Okay, so why are we doing this? We're selecting the same way that we selected play, the button, we're selecting another 2 elements and we're putting them in a variable. So can you go back to the HTML and let's try to find .init and .game, those 2 elements. But if you want, you can do it in the inspector, but it's okay. Let's do it here. So there they are. So init is the parent of play. On the right side, do you see init? It's right there. It's saying init is the parent of button. So basically it's wrapping button and we're selecting that div. The same way that we selected button because we wanted to listen to the click, we are selecting init and probably because we want to do something else with it that I actually don't know. Luis is the only one that knows. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. We're selecting init. What else are we doing? We're selecting the other one, right? The
Game is hidden.
Oh, but it's right there. Even if it's hidden, it should be there, right? Or it's hidden with CSS. Is display
right there,
none?
but the CSS is
okay.
display none.
Okay, so when you use the display none, can you show the display none, please, on the actual CSS? Okay, so as you can see here in the CSS, we explicitly said that the element with the class .game, I haven't said what a class is. Imagine it's like an ID. I'm going to explain it in a second, but imagine it's like an ID. The same way that the button had an ID play, we can have another element have an ID game, okay? And we're saying we want to display none, so that basically says that we want to hide it. We don't want it to show on the HTML. So it's hidden by default because we're explicitly saying that in the CSS. We're saying any element with the class game, we want to show it. You can see that is Luis basically removed that rule. We said that we don't want to hide it anymore, and now it's showing by default. But we can go back to hiding it with display none, and that way it's not shown as default. You know, if we refresh, it's not showing anymore. Okay. And it's not even showing up on the right side, like in the inspector. Go to the inspector and see if we can see it there. The element with the class name. No, but you can just open it. Ah, there it is. Look, there it is. Can you expand game? There's a little arrow, a black arrow. Yeah. Okay, so on the right side, you can see that game, the element with the class game, it's there on the HTML, but it's not really on the website, so it's not showing up. Okay. So what's next? Why are we selecting those two elements? Can you continue with the code so that we can see what are your intentions?
Now we need to get all cars in the HTML.
Okay, so another query selector. If you have any questions, just ask. So we're also selecting cards, and we're also selecting another element called 4 points. Okay. So that's core. Yeah, well, but we may want to see it later. Can you? Because can you do? What do you want to do with? Like, can you do the on click for the button, so that we can see the next part of the HTML?
Yes.
Because it's getting a bit abstract because we're selecting so many elements that we don't know what they're going to be about. So I think it's better just to continue with. Let's do the on click for the button, and then we're going to be able to see what the other elements are about. Okay, so we're saying we want to start listening, so that's what it means. Add event listener means I want to start listening. The click on play. Remember that the button is called play, right? So I want to start listening. The click on play. And what do you do after it's clicked? You call a function, right? Remember that we can have in JavaScript something called a function. A function is basically a piece of code that runs later. Remember? Okay, so we're going to put there a piece of code that runs later. When it's clicked. You know, so we're basically specifying a bunch of lines now that are going to run after the button is clicked, not before. That's why we have to put it on a function, because that's what functions do. They wrap code that is not for now, it's for later. We need to hide this. Yeah. Okay, so what Luis is saying that, right. So remember that we were saying in the CSS that by default, the element with the class .game is hidden? So JavaScript is ideal to make it not hidden, you know? So we can say now that we want, after the button is clicked, we don't want the element with the class .game hidden anymore, and we want to show the other one. So style.display none. The other one will be game.style.display block. The opposite of none is block. I know it doesn't make any sense, but if you study CSS a little bit more, you'll see that it makes sense. Basically, you have to Google all the possible values of the variable display. So if you go to CSS display in Google, I recommend that you always open the W3 Schools link, because that's an amazing website, and you click on it, and it will show you all the possible things you can do with a display, right? You can do a display none, inline, block, and inline block, and there's more, but these ones are pretty much the major ones. So when you do display none, you're hiding it. When you do display block, you're showing it. That's CSS. It's a CSS thing. That's why I didn't explain anything about it at the beginning of the workshop. Okay, so going back to the code, we changed the display property style of display to none in the init, and we swapped them. Basically, we swapped them. Now init is hidden and game is shown. So let's see what happens. If you refresh and you click on the button, you see, now the other one is hidden and this one is shown. So that's a little trick that you have to show something without refreshing the website. You know, like you can say the other div that contains the button, the init on the right side. Can you show on the right side where init is? Yeah. So remember, init, it's on the right side in the HTML, and it's what shows as default. And then game is the other div, and it shows it's hidden by default. So what we're doing is that we're hiding game and we're showing game and we're hiding init. We're hiding the one at the top and showing the one at the bottom that Luis was showing. Okay, so that's it. So your initial HTML contained both, but now we're hiding one and showing the other one. Okay, what's the next step?
We need to generate the cards with the image.
Okay, so we're gonna now start working with the images. Because by default, those divs with the cards, I don't know if you remember, but there's 9 squares on the game, on the .game div, the div that has the class game. So those 9 squares will need to be replaced with actual images when the user clicks on them. So we're calling a function that we're going to call generate cards that is going to take care of that. I'm sure that you have questions, so don't be shy about it. Oh, I don't know. I don't know why it muted. I was saying that we are randomly generating the card positions, because you want to make sure that a memory game always varies. You don't play always the same, because that will not make any sense, right? So you want to randomly generate the positions of the cards. That's why that function in the line number 8, the 18, says rand number. It's basically a small function to get a random position. And that's it. That's what it is. In JavaScript, you have reserved words. Remember when I was talking about reserved words, where const is one of them, of course. Math is another one. And math allows you to generate random numbers. So the random number function generates random numbers for positions, because the cards are going to be positioned randomly in the game board. The second function that we're building, the generate cards, it's getting a random number, and then I don't know what it's doing yet. Continue, Mr. Luis.
Okay. Now, the use images is an array with all image or all position used. Now, image, right, an empty array, let new page array.
So we have two arrays,
Now,
okay?
yes, once,
Used images and new images, okay?
yes, the first save the image position used, right? And the second save the new image, because we have to make a couple of image.
A couple of images. What do you mean? Well, just do the code and we'll figure it out. Let me see. Used images index of r is equal to -1. Used images, okay? And then new images. So what do you mean when you say used images? What is a used image? Because we have a bunch of images, right? So what is a used image? Used images that push. When you say push, well, I guess you guys see a lot of different function names that are. Let me see what you're doing now. Yeah. So used means that you open it, or what? When the user clicks on an image, that means used.
Yes.
Ah, okay. So click it images, basically. As you can see, the variable names are really important when you pick them, because sometimes you don't even know what is being stored in that variable. So the variable names are really important. Yeah, those are the not clicked images, I guess, right? The images that have not been clicked yet. One, two, three. Okay. Then total images is less than minutes on left. And what is this part? It's trying to get the winner. Or no, because we're generating the images. Okay.
Are you using recursive in this function? Why? Because we need to make two couples of image to the game. For example, image 1, image 2, another image 1, image 2, because the image is a couple of them.
You mean that when you click on the image, you want to show the image first? That they come in pairs is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, so for each image we have two images. Okay. And then after we generate the cards, are you rendering the cards now? Yeah, you're rendering the cards. Okay.
Now, this code generate the array of images.
Okay, so we have the function that generates the array of images, and then total images. So what are you doing now? You're making sure that generate cards is not working. So he's trying to print on the command line all the cards just to be able to see if we generate them correctly. And you also show, let's see.
We have 16 cars. We need 16 image, but we need couple of the each one.
So we have frozen the image for a second. We have on the right side we have all the cards. We have 7, 2, 6, 5, 4. These are the names of the images. We have an array with 16 cards because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 4 by 4, right? So it's 16 cards. Okay.
Now we are put the each image in the car.
Okay. We are about to finish soon the exercise. Because I know that we've been extending the workshop a little bit more than what it should, I think, right? Yeah. So after we finish rendering the images, if you want to ask anything right now, don't worry, just ask. You're probably a bit confused with some of the things. That's normal in code. You have to take your time to read it later and try to understand it. And you can ask me on Twitter. You can ask whatever you want, and I don't mind answering any questions. So right now what you're doing is, let me explain this code. It's assign cards. Basically, it's what it's going through the 16 positions, the 16 squares, and putting the image URL on it. So we're saying that for each square, we're going through all the squares in the line 47. We're saying for each square, we want to select that square. So we're using the same query selector that we use at the beginning of the exercise, that we were selecting stuff from the DOM, from the actual. We were selecting stuff from the HTML. We were saying, I remember that we were trying to select the button, to listen to the click on the button. So because the cards, you can see them there in the HTML, they have IDs, right? ID M0, M1, M2, M3, all the way until M15. So we're saying we want to select them all, and we want to assign an image to them, an image source. And the image source is coming from the array of images that we declared at the beginning of the exercise. Right, and the images are hidden by default as well. So let's see, here they are, all the images assigned to the squares. Now we just have to make sure, can you click on any of them? Or nothing happens yet, right? We have to listen to the click. Yeah, listen to the click on any of them now, and then we'll be able to swap them. Can you leave it like that? Don't hide them yet. Leave them like that. Let's listen to the click on the cards. Basically, when you click on the card, it will replace the image with the square. Back to the square. Originally, they were all squares. Then we swapped them with images because we want to make sure to have the cards in place. And then when the user clicks, we're going to toggle between square and image. So that's the functionality for a memory game. So now we're listening to each card click. No matter the card, it doesn't really matter what the card is. If it's the first card or the second one or whatever, we're going to all of them, we're going to listen to the click. Again, listening to clicks. And we're going to function called select card that I don't know what it does yet. So where's that function? What that function is going to do is it's going to hide or show the card depending on the state of the card. If the card is hidden, it's going to show it. If it's not hidden, it's going to hide it. Okay, so So we're saying selections less than 2. What are you doing with that? Why selections less than 2? So when the card is clicked, we basically get the card, and then we ask with a condition, we ask if the, I don't know what selections dot length less than 2 is. We're about to discover that. If anyone has an idea what that is, I'm open to suggestions. We're still wondering what's in Luis' head.
If when they click in the card, he confirm if we have two cards to compare. If
we
not,
have two cards to compare, can
yes.
you show me the declaration of the variable selections? It's not there. Okay. Okay. So the selections are the cards that the user has already clicked, right? When I select a card, selections will add, that array will contain that card. And then it's gonna, okay, I see. So what this is doing is, you know that in a memory game, you have to click two cards. And if you click them correctly, or if they match, you won that little cycle. So that's what he's doing here. He's saying if the card that was clicked is the second card, so I already clicked on the first one, and I'm about to click on the second one, so we'll probably have to see if they match. If not, I just, in the line 66, you see how he's just pushing the card to the selections. He's saying, okay, if selections is empty, that means that it's the first card that you're clicking. So I'm gonna add it to selections. If not, it's the second card, and I have to see if they match. That's basically what we're doing in line 69. We're saying if they match, then we have to compare them to see if they are the same. And that would be almost the last part of the exercise, basically. So now you click on the first one. Yeah. Second one. What happens if you click again? Nothing. Can you put a console
Nothing.
log? Can you put a console log there just to see how when you click, it actually execute the selections? Yeah, console log in the 60. No, console log in the line above, in the 60. Before the if, basically. Before the if. That would be, yeah, okay, do it there. So let's console log and let's say a card has been clicked. Say a card has been clicked. And these are the current selections. And these are the current selections. And then put after the quote, put a comma selections. That way we can see the actual selections. So let's see this, save it, and let's see it on the command line. So look at the command line on the right. When Luis clicks on a card, it says a card has been clicked, and these are the current selections. So the image 0 was selected. But when he clicks again, it says again, a card has been clicked, and this is the current selection. So now we have two images. So that's what I was saying. Like if we have two, then it's time to check if they match, basically. Okay, and this will be the last part. Someone is saying that the screen froze. Yeah, the workshop is being recorded, and we're gonna publish this recording as well. So you're gonna have the code, the recording, and the presentation. So Taufik was asking if we offer Java courses that are more general. You mean Java or JavaScript? Yeah, actually both are the. We do offer courses in both. And what do you mean by more general? Normally our approach and your approach as well should be trying to focus your JavaScript skills in building how the market is evolving. You know, there's people that may like to do games. There's people that may like to do applications like, for example, I don't know, Uber Eats or something like that. We can do. Right. Yeah, so we're if you want to start in the world of JavaScript, my recommendation would be to follow a particular curriculum very specifically. You know, don't start wandering in many tutorials, many workshops. So just follow a particular curriculum and try to finish it. And then you can look for more tutorials, because the thing is that at the beginning there's so many things to learn at the same time that it's like an egg chicken problem. You know, you have to learn conditions, and then you have to learn variables, and then you have to learn functions, and then you have to learn events, and then you have to learn like all the things that we were using here. I know that this workshop seems like a lot because we're using all of it at the same time, you know. So there's so many things to learn at the same time that I would recommend that try to lower your anxiety and try to learn everything there is in a particular curriculum. It could be our course, of course, will be ideal. But if you don't want to take ours, you can take any other and just follow it. You know, follow it by the book without any hesitation. Don't think, no, but I learn more in a visual way. Okay, it's about practice, not about learning. What I mean is that you only learn when you practice. So you have to follow the curriculum and do the exercises that they propose, and then you can start switching to other tutorials that you like, you know. So Luis is doing a bunch of things there. Let's see what is the last part. Luis is testing our skills here, definitely, with all the things that he's doing. If you're completely overwhelmed by this exercise,
Yes.
Don't feel sad. I think this exercise has been a little bit tough, you know, a little bit tough to start with. So don't feel bad about it. I think it's completely normal if you feel overwhelmed right now. Because the last part that we're doing is this part here is we're listening, where we have to switch back the cards, you know, we have to switch them back to. You have to wait for 2 seconds. When you click on both cards, then you have to wait 2 seconds and switch them back. So that's what we're doing right now. We are using set timeout in the 66. It's a set timeout. It's basically switching back the cards to their previous state after 500 milliseconds. And that's pretty much it. Can you test how it works, Mr. Luis? You click on both, and after 2 seconds, it should put them back, but it didn't. So in the meantime, I'll share the code right now so that you guys can have it. Luis, can you click on your workspace? It's working now. Cool. So can you click on your workspace to share the running workspace, or the how do you say the snapshot on the top right? Click on your avatar in Gitpod, I mean. Yeah, and then share workspace snapshot. No, not that one, the other one. The running the workspace snapshot, exactly. Copy the first link and share that in the chat. So that's the code, so that you guys can have it for later, for going back to this code. And the video, it's gonna be in YouTube, in the Academy channel. If you go to youtube.com/ I think it's for Geeks Academy, but I think you have to say channel first. Channel/for Geeks Academy. Nope. Let me find the URL for you guys very quickly. There it is. I think if you search for Geeks Academy, you will find the channel. Yeah. Here it is. I'm gonna share this code here. It's on our channel. You'll find the recording of the video and the video itself. There it is. So if there's any questions, we can take 5 minutes to answer those questions. And thank you everyone for coming. Remember to continue practicing every day. Every day. I'm gonna leave also my Twitter again if you guys have questions about the exercise. Thank you everyone for coming, and have a good Thanksgiving as well. Yeah, you're right, Hazel. It was a little bit overwhelming. I agree with you. There's a couple of videos for other workshops that we've done that is also, if you look at the Breathe Code channel here, switch account to Breathe Code, you can find other beginner workshops that we've done before. Actually, the 4Geeks channel as well, but let me share you one that I think is less overwhelming. Yeah, like for example, this one's. Let me see. Introduction to, yeah, here you have Introduction to CSS, Introduction to JavaScript. This one is super cool about, it's another game, a little bit less overwhelming. I can post it here. I would recommend you do that as well if you're already familiar with HTML, CSS. And I think there's another one, a to-do list and a landing page. The to-do list is also a very good example always when you're starting. So that's another one you can follow, the to-do list. It's also not difficult, or less difficult, because the card, there it is, that one. Okay, so if there's no more questions, have a good night, everyone. But this was great, though. The structure was really simple. Thank you, thank you. Hey, everyone, bye-bye.